Hi students, in this video we will discuss about loops in C programming. So according to me, this loops plays a very important role. I will try to post at least 100 programs in loops. If you are strong in loops, any programming language will be simple as well as easy. So I will try to post maximum programs, even it will help you your coding skills also. Okay, now first let us see what is loop. Here loop, generally the purpose of loop is to execute this set of statements repeatedly. Suppose if you want to perform or if you want to execute any number of statements repeatedly, we use loops. Now let us assume, for example, I want to display the message how are you onto the screen. So what we will use, printf function we will use, and we will write this message how are you inside this printf. Now the same how are you message I want to display 100 times, or I want to display for 1000 times. What we need to do, one method is write this printf for 1000 times. Instead of that, the same thing, instead of repeating number of times, so if we place this code inside this loop will be executed for number of times, the specified number of times this loop will be executed. So loops are repetitive statements. What is a loop? We call the loops are repetitive statements. So definition you can write like this: a loop is defined as block of statements executing repeatedly until the condition becomes false. A loop is defined as block of statements executing repeatedly until the condition becomes false. So once the condition becomes false, it comes out of the loop. Now let us see how it executes. Loop, the syntax for the loop is loop, some condition will be there. Here conditions already we have seen, a greater than b, or n greater than or equal to, n less than or equal to 100 something. So condition, if this condition is true, then control enters into this loop and executes the statements of the loop. After executing the statements of the loop, control again comes to the conditional part. So if this condition is true, once again it enters into the loop, and this process will be repeated until the condition becomes false. Once the condition becomes false, then the control comes out of the loop. So here these loops are used to execute set of statements or block of statements repeatedly. So in order to execute this block of statements number of times, we use loops. Here C language supports three types of loops. So here we call types of loops. Here C language supports three types of loops. First one we call while loop, second one for loop, third one do while loop. So while loop, for loop and do while loop. Here this while loop and for loop are called as entry controlled loop, and do while loop is called as exit controlled loop. So while and for, these two loops are called as entry controlled loops. So these two loops are called as pre-test loops, pre-test or entry controlled loop, entry controlled loops, while loop and for loop. So why they are called as pre-test or entry control loops? Because the condition will be checked for these loops before entering into the loop. Before entering into the loop, the condition will be checked for these loops. So they are called as pre-test loops or entry controlled loops. Whereas do while loop, is called as post test loop or exit controlled loop. Post test loop or exit controlled loop. This do while loop is called as either post test loop or exit control loop. In this, why it is called means, here in do while loop the condition is checked after executing the statements of the loop. After executing the statements of the loop, the condition will be checked. Now first let us discuss the while loop, or let me write the syntax for while loop. Here first let us see the syntax for while loop. While syntax. Here while some condition will be there, then if the condition is true, then this set of statements will be executed. If the condition is true, then this set of statements will be executed. Here in while loop, the condition is checked before entering into the loop. Then let me check, let us write the condition for syntax for loop. Now here for loop syntax. Now what happens in for loop is, for initialization part, condition part and iteration part, iter, let us write. So here in while loop, initialization part, conditional part and iteration part, all these three are placed in a single line. So what is initialization? We call generally it as starting value or I equal to 1. Then what is conditional part? I less than or equal to n. Then or I less than n. Iteration, it will be either I plus plus or I minus minus. In both these loops, the condition is checked before entering into the loop. The condition is checked before entering into the loop. That is why both these loops are called as pre-test loops or entry controlled loops. Now let us check the syntax for do while loop. Now what happens in do while loop is, in do while loop the condition will be checked at the end of the loop. Do while syntax. In do while loop, do, then while, condition, then end with semicolon. Then the statements of do while loop. Then here in do while loop what happens? First control directly it enters into this loop, executes. After executing, it will check the condition. If the condition is true, once again it enters into the loop and the process will be repeated until the condition becomes false. Just these are the syntaxes. In order to explain you what is pre-test and what is post-test, I am explaining now. In the later videos, we will see the difference between while loop and for loop, as well as while loop and do while loop. Differences we will see. What are the major differences? When to use while loop, when to use for loop, and when to use do while loop. We will discuss more clearly in the next videos. Then here I will start, in the next video I will start the basic programming from loops beginning to maximum. Toughest programs we will do in loops. Minimum, as I told you, 100 plus programs we will do in loops. I will try to upload in a short span of time 100 plus only in loops. Thank you. We'll see you in next video.